Hello and welcome to NLP Metaprograms episode 10, Convincer Demonstration or Convincer Demo. As you can see, I'm back in our offices here in London, having traveled all the way back from Hawaii just over the last couple of days for our fantastic biannual Huna Intensive. So back to the world of NLP. So just a quick recap on episode 9 was convincer representation, which was discovering what representational system the person uses to become convinced if somebody is good at what they do, whether they have to see them do it, hear about them doing it, do it with them, or read a report. And just off the top of my head, I don't think I mentioned before that in actual fact, the convincer representation may or may not be the same as the person's preferred representational system. Preferred representational system in NLP, for those of you new to NLP, is the representational system the person uses the most. It's the one they're most comfortable with. It's the one they find the easiest to use, and therefore the one they rely on in times of stress. So we asked that question first. How do you know that somebody else is good at what they do? You give them a number of choices. Do you need to see them do it? Do you need to hear them do it? Do you need to hear about them doing it? Do you need to do it with them? Or do you need to read a report about it? And they give you an answer to that one. They pick off the list of 4. Then we take the answer that they've given us for that particular question into this one. And we've got 4 choices for the person to make here. The first is, we'd say, are you just automatically convinced that somebody is good at their job? Or do you need to see them do it, hear about them doing it, do it with them, or read a report about them doing it successfully a number of times? If they say it's a number of times, you say how many times? If the person says 2 or 3, then we'd always go for the higher number out of the 2 that they gave us. Or a period of time. If they say it's a period of time, we'd say, if you were to know how long, 2 weeks. Or are you never convinced, which is consistent. So give the person all 4 choices. We go, are you just automatically convinced that somebody's good at their job? Do you need to see them do it, hear about them doing it, do it with them, read a report about them doing it a number of times? Or see, hear, do it with them, read a report about them doing it well over a period of time? Or are you never convinced that somebody's good at their job? Have them pick one. Then these 2 are easy, automatically consistent. If they say, I need to see them do it a number of times, then you say, if you were to know how many times, always go with the higher number, 2 or 3, 3 or 4, 1 or 2, just be on the safe side. If you were to know, if they say period of time, if you were to know how long, 1 week, 2 weeks, 10 days, as I say, automatic and consistent are simple. So then let's go through what these actually mean when they've given us the choice. Let's take automatic and consistent first. So automatically convinced, this is a person who's just like, always convinced that everybody is good at what they do. Just take it in completely face value, which you can probably appreciate from that could be problematical in certain situations. Could be problematical from a recruitment point of view, and certainly could be problematical from a management point of view, and also giving people feedback on their performance point of view. Again, a little bit like we were talking about when we were talking about frame of reference with somebody who's completely external frame of reference. The person who's automatically convinced is a bit of a reed in the wind. So I mentioned it before. When I've done Metaprograms training for salespeople, they go, David, where do we find all the people who are automatically convinced? Because they'll just be automatically convinced that our product's the best. Well, yeah, they will. when you're there. But then when a competitor goes in to sell to them the next day, they'll automatically be convinced that that person is better than you. So really not what you want to build long-term win-win relationships. Consistent, this is the person who's never convinced. Not an easy path to tread for either the person in question or the people around them. So this person will never be convinced. So when they're wanting to make a decision around a number of different options, they'll never be convinced about any of the options. They'll finally pick one of the options, but they won't be convinced about it. A manager who's got a consistent, never convinced Metaprogram profile, let's say a sales manager, will every day go up to the salespeople and go, okay, how much have you sold today? And they might go, well, I've sold nothing today. Well, what's going on? How come you've sold nothing today? The salesperson might go, just a minute, I brought in a £100,000 or £1 million sale yesterday. What's the problem? Your consistent convincer manager is going to say, that was yesterday. What about today? What you've got running here with the convincer demo is it's running in parallel with the person's decision-making strategy. So this person is just automatically convinced. This person, no matter how many times they run their decision-making strategy, they're never going to be convinced. This person, if they've got a 3 times convincer, they will need to run their decision-making strategy successfully with the same product, the same service 3 times, then they'll be convinced. If we've got a person with a 2-week period of time, they're going to have to run their decision-making strategy successfully with the same product, the same service for 2 weeks, and then they'll be convinced. So again, the consistent is problematical because makes it difficult for the person to make decisions. They will be a nightmare really as a manager because they're going to give their team a hard time every day. It's also a challenging one in personal intimate relationships because the equivalent in relationships to the decision-making strategy is our recognizing attraction strategy. So what this person will do in a relationship is they'll say to their partner, do you find me attractive? Their partner will say, you asked me that yesterday and I said, yes, I find you attractive. The person with the consistent metaprogram is going to go, that was yesterday, what about today? So, as I say, it's a tough path to tread, both for the person who's got the consistent metaprogram and for the people around them. If we look at the other two here, then the number of times convincer, this is the most common convincer metaprogram, as in there are more people that have number of times convincer than any of the other combinations, and the most common is 3 times. So if you've seen, this is why they use it on QVC and TV advertising and shopping channels and all that kind of thing. You know, they'll go, okay, we've got this food blender and it's $19.95, but don't order yet because there's more. Not only do you get this food blender, you also get this citrus juice extractor attachment. But don't order yet because there's more. Not only do you get the food blender, the citrus juice extractor, you also get the automatic potato peeling attachment. All for $19.99. Order now, on. So they filled the 3 times convincer. That's why they do that on shopping channels and QVC. And it works. It's very, very successful. Then we've got the period of time, which, as I say, could be a number of days, it could be a week, it could be 10 days, it could be 2 weeks. Problematical metaprogram profiles of people would be if it's a very high number or a very long period of time, because it doesn't make it easy for them to make decisions. So let's then look at how do we go about utilizing this with our potential team members, our potential prospective customers. Automatic, to say they're going to be automatically convinced. They're going to go for it. But the problem is they're going to go for the next thing too. Okay. Number of times, then what you're going to want to do is, show them it. If they're convinced a rep is visual, talk to them about it, or have a number of people talk to them about it. Do it with them, or show them 3 reports about it if 3 is their number of times convincer. That's how we would utilize it to enable them to be convinced before they then make their decision. Period of time. Here's a potential short circuit on period of time. Let's say that you discover that somebody's got a 2-week period of time convincer. What you do is call them up. Let's say you're talking in a sales situation or an influencing situation where you're wanting to have the person decide and do a particular call to action. What you do is get back into contact with them in no less than 10% of the time period. So like if it was a 2-week time period of time, I would go for like 2, 3, maybe 4 days later, going back to them. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to pace their metaprogram and then lead them. So it's not guaranteed to work. And it does work quite often. Would be you would open up the call and say to them, I don't know about you, I've been so busy since we last met, it almost seems like 2 weeks. It almost seems like a fortnight. I was just wondering, I wanted to check in with you. Have you decided to go ahead with the particular call to action that we've got? Have you decided to go ahead and invest to purchase what we're wanting to sell to them? That's a way of short-circuiting this in a shorter time frame than the actual time frame that they've got. Consistent, again, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pace where they're at and then lead them. So with somebody who's consistent convincer, we'd say, you'll never be convinced that this is the blah for you. The only way that you'll ever be convinced that this is the blah for you is to go ahead and make the decision now. Again, not guaranteed to work, and it can short circuit that consistent metaprogram. Now, let's just talk about this. What we're looking at here is when we say about short circuiting, we're talking about short-circuiting it in a situation which is a win-win situation. Let's talk about it in sales for a start. So I'm talking about we would utilize this metaprogram when we've ascertained that the person has a need or want for what we are offering. There is a value for them personally in having that need or value or want satisfied, and their perception of the value on that need or want being satisfied is greater than we're asking them to invest. If you've got those 3 things there, then as a salesperson, I take it that you actually have the responsibility to use whatever you know to enable people to have their need or want satisfied, and therefore to get the value that's attached to it. And it is truly an investment in that what they're having to invest with you is significantly less than the value that they're going to get in return. Then when we do this, it actually makes it possible and it makes it easy for the person to decide. By doing that, we've actually served them. We've enabled them to have their need or want satisfied. Let's just talk about a couple of problematical ones here and how we might work with somebody to change their metaprogram. This would be something, I wouldn't even entertain looking at this in coaching. This would be something that I would do if I'm doing a breakthrough session with someone. They've come to me for personal change, and part of their presenting problem is created by their metaprogram profile. Automatically convinced, then we could treat that as a limiting decision. This one and this one are kind of like similar. You would need to actually question more with the client as to what was their purpose of always being convinced or never being convinced. Quite often when you ask that question, what does that do for you? What's your purpose in just always being convinced or never being convinced? Then that question can quite often bring up a limiting belief or a limiting decision, like not being able to trust themselves. So let's say that they had an experience in their past where they didn't go with their intuition, they didn't go with their gut, they didn't go with their knowing. And as a result of that, they had a bad experience. So then what they went was, whenever I'm offered something, let's just go for it. Equally, you might have had this like a similar or a different response here. They were offered something, they were given some options, they immediately went for one particular thing. It turned out bad for them. So as a result of that, either consciously or unconsciously, they went, I am never ever going to be convinced ever again. So then what we've got is we've got the limiting belief, the limiting decision behind these two potentially problematic or metaprograms, profiles, which then means using timeline therapy, using MER, using Oku'u in Huna, then we can actually assist the person in changing that limiting belief, that limiting decision, and that will change their metaprogram profile. So there we are. That's the Convincer demo. A really important one in, as you can tell, in relationships, also in influence in general, and in sales. I mentioned in the little briefing for this Metaprogram live, also in therapy, because I think it's a really important thing when you do change work with people, that when they leave your office, they are convinced their problem has disappeared. So therefore, we would want to utilize their metaprogram to enable them to be convinced. Again, automatic is likely to be part of the presenting problem they tend to work with you on anyway, because automatic, they'll be convinced that the problem's disappeared until they leave you and somebody tells them otherwise. Well, you don't seem any different to me. Really? Yep. Consistent, well, they're never going to be convinced. So they're going to go, at the end of the session, you'll say, are we done? And they go, well, I don't know. I guess I'll just have to wait until the next time I'm presenting. I guess I'll have to wait until the next time I'm in this situation. And the next time I'm in that situation. And the next time, and the next time. So probably if you find that, it's probably part of the presenting problem. Number of times, let's say it's 3, which is the most common, then if you are doing release work using timeline therapy, mental emotional release, or Oku'u in Huna, then you would want to test 3 events in the past. Once you've tested 3 events in the past and the emotions disappeared or limiting decisions disappeared, then they'll be convinced it's gone. What do we do for a period of time? So what we do for a period of time, let's say it's 2 weeks, is we take them out into the future to 2 weeks, to 3 weeks, to a year, to 5 years, to 10 years, and notice that their problem has stayed gone, which satisfies their period of time convincer before they leave your office. Okay? So I hope that's useful, and we'll be back next week for episode number 11 in our Metaprograms series. So have a fantastic week, and we'll see you then. Bye.